Thank you for joining us. I'm Adam Brown from Deakin University, and I'm talking today to Clim Pacheco. Thank you very much for joining us, Clim.
Thanks, Adam.
We have just had lunch for about an hour and a half, and I wish that we had have recorded the entire conversation because it's going to be hard to keep to a 15-20 minute chat.
Yeah.
But it's basically what I'm wanting to talk to you about is the issue of motivation broadly. But before we get to that, I would love for you to tell the audience a little bit about yourself. And you've got a fascinating way of doing it because you can kind of talk about partly your model of thinking or one of your models of thinking as your sort of brief bio. Yeah. So could you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Certainly. I was born in Africa, in Uganda, and lived my formative years over there. And probably that's where, when you talk about modeling, at the age of 9, I thought my dad had taken me over to the source of the River Nile and said to dream my life. And I thought it was very strange for a young 9-year-old. I was enjoying life and didn't think about the future. But what happened was I did play along with the game as I thought it was. But I thought, why wouldn't I be an engineer? So why wouldn't I be a hydropower systems engineer in due course? Because a very close friend was the chief engineer of a power station, which is very close by, and I was really impressed by him, as well as the power of water. And the second thing, as I was telling you at lunch, I basically thought I'd just go to the other end of the Nile. This was at age 9, and never thought it would happen. My dad retired in the 70s and went to India, and I followed him over there and did engineering. So I did my power systems engineering and had not really associated with my past dreams, if I can put it that way, at 9. But the first job I got offered was in a hydropower station. In a power station, and I opted for the hydropower, and that's when I realized, oh wow, there was this thing at the back of my mind, that dream, and I realized it. And so I worked for Tata Electric, a very good company in India, enjoyed engineering, and later thought I'd stretch engineering a bit and went overseas to the Arabian Gulf. And over there I did transmissions and distribution engineering. And over there was when I said that, why don't I finish the other part of the dream? And I went to Egypt, not quite to the end of the Nile, but to Cairo. And it was fascinating because I realized, I'm 29. It took me a long time from 9 to reach that second dream. And that's when I really said, why not dream big? I was in the deserts of Alain in Abu Dhabi and thought, if I can dream from 9 to 29 and 30, why don't I make a thought process in my life and say, by 30 I'll stop engineering, because many people were telling me, Clem, you've got this talent for management. I didn't think I had, but and so I said, after 30 I'd try to get into management, and at 45 I'd go and do something different, but for a cause which I didn't quite know what. And at 60 I'd free fall completely, so and my life followed that, because I migrated to Australia in 1983, and the first thing I did was try to get a job in an organization that was huge, which meant that management was a potential for me to grow. And I joined Public Transport Corporation Victoria at the time, and to my good luck I actually ended up heading as group manager of trains, then tram and bus and V-Line, and then worked with the Premier of the time, Jeff Kennett, on the privatization of transport. So brilliant education from a management perspective, and I felt I needed to then teach. And as it turned out, I was 43 at the time. I thought, why not go into education? And so I went back to Melbourne Uni and did my grad dip in vocational education training, and then became a sessional teacher in Swinburne and also Victoria University. But to my good luck again, I think destiny follows you when you've got a thought, and I basically found myself at Chisholm Institute of TAFE. And at that time, there was this big push of management education, how to bring education into the workplace. So I was lucky to be able to to develop that model. And we as head of management and leadership at Chisholm TAFE, I worked with my team, and we did about 64 companies. We developed about 4,000 executives Australia-wide on the work-based model. So really enjoyed this career, and everything was about my life, was coming together. And I felt, okay, but is this all I'm going to do? Let me test myself globally. So I joined insurance and finance as a change manager at the time, and to my good luck again, the executive, the CEO at the time said, look, I'd like to go global. I'd like you to take over as head of education there. So it was ANZIF, the Australian and New Zealand Institute of Insurance and Finance. And really great, because we used to set up training frameworks for countries, and we worked in about 50 countries, globally. Brilliant for me. But what it did was it actually reinforced the 30, 45, 60. So 3 years ago, I thought I turned 60. My wife threw a great party, and good friends from transport and education and insurance came over, and they said, what are you up to now, Clim? And that night I thought about it. I said, yeah, I've reached 60. Why don't I do what I said? I'd free fall. And so I set up my own business transformation solutions, to do good for society and social and community causes. So bloody long, slow story, but that's what I'm
a
at.
fascinating story.
Yeah.
I mean, the experiences you have occur to me to resonate so much with what I've been doing on a micro level. I love the way that you haven't planned out your life in the conventional sense, because as you said, you had this broad notion of 30, 45, 60, you didn't know what necessarily they involved. But what I've been doing at a micro level to inspire students to motivate themselves, because in the end, they're the only people, and anyone is the only person who can motivate themselves in the end, isn't it? Because we can be extrinsically motivated to some degree.
Yes.
But we need to push ourselves, and we get certain things from that. What you've done at a macro level is kind of what I've been doing at a micro level. And I'm wondering, before we reflect on that a little bit more, if you can tell us a little bit more about your current model, the 3+1+1.
Okay. I suppose what happened was, when I had that party, my wife said, where is the money going to come from? You want to do good social and community work. That's grand. You've always wanted grand plans, but where's the money? And very quickly I thought about it, and I said, yes, you can't just give in your life without actually even earning. So immediately I thought, okay, there's got to be an earning, a learning, and a giving component to my new business. So the earning, I said that if I do 3 days corporate consulting based on my past skills and a future thought, that'll give me enough revenue to be able to satisfy the giving. And I volunteer at the moment with Salvation Army, and I've done work with International Needs Australia, mainly in leadership programs and strat planning and stuff. But I realized to be current, to still be able to contribute to society, whether it's social or community or otherwise, I needed to learn. So I've got this 3+1+1 is equal to 10, and I'll talk about the 10 later. But what it is 3 days I do consulting, and it includes lecturing too in management, and that actually complements my learning, and I do a bit of executive mentoring too, 1 day a week, and 1 day a week I volunteer, and I've done that for the last 3.5 years since I started the business. So the 3+1+1, I say it's a 5 day sort of breakup, and you don't always get work for 3 days or mentoring every day, once a week. But the concept allows me to think about my satisfaction level, which is why it's equal to 10. So it's exponentially better than what I'm putting in. So it's a great model for me to measure where I'm at, because the engineer is still there in me.
Yeah. Well, that's a fascinating thing, and trying to summarize all these points is difficult, I guess. But those two models, to me, do resonate with the form of gamification that I talk about. A lot of my research and my teaching, and I'm getting students to gamify their own behavior, activities online, and so on. You've leveled up over, you sometimes more than a decade. You kind of set your level. and you kind of level up, not in a certain necessarily a promotional sense, but just in a reward sense. You actually set a reward as the level, isn't it? And so that's really key to understanding how you reward yourself. The other really amazing thing that you talk about it, when I talk to, and when probably a lot of lecturers talk to undergraduate students and postgraduate students, it's all about put yourself out there in order to get a job. Do some volunteer work. Lifelong learning is the key. We can't give you everything. What you're talking about is you still have the learning component there. You still have the giving, volunteering component there, but everything sort of relates at the same time, because you say that your volunteer work has been kind of in the same areas that you do work in anyway, in a sense. So you get the kind of synergies happening. And it's so key to your motivation, because you're working out how much is enough. As you were telling me at lunch, you work out how much is enough and what do you need. What I find when I've asked students, and I've only done this relatively recently, I've done different forms of gamification. I've kind of been an overseer who tracks everyone's behaviour and rewards them, teacher to student rewards. I'm trying to get students to gamify their own behaviours, because that old system won't work now that students have solved the puzzle. Asking people how to reward themselves, how would you reward yourself to stay motivated, is actually a really hard question.
Certainly is, isn't it? I think with me, what it was is I was always known as the person who loved work. But what people didn't know, or my kids even did not know, was prior to that, I used to be really interested in sports. I was, as a youth, I was really thin. I mean, not like now, but I was very puny. And I still remember my mom used to say, you're doing extremely well educationally. Because I used to really top the class and everything else, and I thought that was it all. And she said to me, she says, Clem, why don't you balance your life? What about sports? And I said, I can't do these team games, it's too much for me. And she asked me to start with table tennis, and because it was a singular thing, and I really became quite good at it. And then I followed that up with tennis and hockey, and so even in Australia I played competitive hockey and stuff, and really enjoyed my tennis and everything else. But I think that taught me that you've got to be holistic, and the reward was not quite a reward as much as exercise and enjoying companionship, But later in life, I think it was more travel. For me, it was like, when I do this, if I can do this, can I go and travel and see new cultures and new places? And in essence, that really was my motivation, because I'd say, I'm going out there, and I might have mentioned to you, right? One thing I wanted to always go was to Antarctica, and I did. And even though I camped only one night overnight, it was good enough. But what it was, the sense of adventure. And I think, there are those things that we fill it with our life. We went to Machu Picchu, the Andes, and I've been now on all the continents in the world, and really said, this is where I am. But there's a second part, I think, to our life, and that is more like re-engaging with my family. Sometimes, as you said, when you're young, you're doing all those things out there which are inspiring you and motivating you, and you get a lot of satisfaction out of that. But you sort of don't realize that there's another life. And for me, my kids grew up knowing that I was around, and because Ali, my wife, would always be there in the background and really nurturing them and all, and I thought that was enough. But I think what I realize as I get older now is that they can re-engage with me in a different space, and that gives me another level of satisfaction. So I think with reward, it's a lot about what you feel, maybe a gap or maybe an exciting sort of feature in your life. And for me, certainly I'm not stopped travel. I still want to do Everest, and not climb the mountain, but at least look at it. But all those things there where you say, why not? And I think now more and more it is, I'm working hard with this lifestyle, to make it a more pronounced thing globally or otherwise. But why don't I reward myself at times with something that is exciting for me and the family? We've traveled as a family, around the world quite often.
Yeah, it strikes me that you started with the dream of life kind of broad statement, and that stayed just morphed into different kinds of models, I suppose. And what's really captures my attention and interest in the 3+1+1 model is that in one sense it can be seen to be a very pragmatic response to the world we are increasingly living in.
Yes.
And no doubt the world that will be increasingly acknowledged as one that does not necessarily see full-time work as the mainstream. We do now, government, industry, we still kind of see full-time work 5 days a week, if not, which is in practical terms more than that usually.
Yes.
But seeing that kind of model, 3 + 1 + 1, and that could be, a model can be shaped by whoever uses it in different ways.
Absolutely.
But thinking in those terms seems to be not only a practical or pragmatic response to the world in which we increasingly live, where, I mean, you hear those disturbing statistics about 50-60% of jobs, how many machines are going to take over the jobs that are currently performed. But it's all about motivation.
Yes.
It's all about reinvigorating and reinvigorating yourself, and you've come up with different models and different ways of articulating the models that you had in mind.
Yes.
Because you have to constantly reflect on what you're doing.
Yes.
And you're the lifelong learner who is continually doing that.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think one thing that really hit me was, to what you're saying is about life as it will be. I read the federal government's, the 2016 federal government's intergenerational report, and they said by 2054, I'm not quite sure of the years, but the lifespan of a man will be 95.5 and the woman will be 96.1 or something to that effect. I realized that here am I at 60, saying to myself, 60 to 70 I'm going to be doing this. It's actually a no-brainer that we'll have to find new lifestyles. We certainly have to, because full-time work will not be there, because more and more, as you rightly said, Adam, the robotization of work, as well as, driverless cars and everything else. I mean, my son's a geek in all this with 3D printing and everything else, but he's taught me that the world will change to such a point where unless we as human beings start rethinking what we're going to do, there'll be too long a time for us to be in retirement. But what do we have to offer as human beings to society for the future? And I think when I'm looking at these models, I believe that, to your point of the 5-day week is really going to end, because robotization will take over that, and that's in the financial service and every other industry too. So if we can then find ourselves, getting a meaningful pattern to life and offering our services to others, and mentoring and coaching, I do a bit of mentoring too. I think that's fulfilling a lifestyle for the future, so that the governments don't have to look at giving us, like baby boomers in my case, giving us more the pension. I don't want to get the pension until I need to get the pension. I want to carry on working, and if that be the way, all those people who feel underemployed or unemployed, could they have an identity? And maybe that's where we've got something to think about and do.
Yeah. It strikes me that a lot of people watching this video, and I'm specifically custom designing this for my undergraduate and postgraduate students, are probably thinking, well, this seems like a long way off, this kind of stuff I need to consider. But a lot of the key take-home points that I'm taking from your models and your experiences do relate to the same kind of messages, the key messages I'm telling people about being active, motivating yourself, making yourself stand out, and basically being a lifelong learner, insofar as the first time we met, and this is probably a great way to wrap up this video, because we met at a sort of a seminar, a public seminar in the city, in Melbourne, and we got talking, and when we got talking about your model, you were saying that when you developed the model, because you have a specific educational background in engineering, you've moved to management, you've moved to teaching, so you've actually had to, in a broad sense, be a lifelong learner and learn different areas as you go by doing, by practicing, as much as by the often the conventional senses of learning in an educational setting. You have also taught yourself the use of digital media. You have a fantastic website, which I may show a bit as we talk in this video here. You've taught yourself basically just by doing. No tech training, anything like that.
Absolutely. I think just to your point, I realized that there's always this thing about as you get older, you become obsolete, or you become dinosaur, and I felt that why don't I actually break the mold in a sense for myself, because I realized that technology was going too far ahead of me, and I was not catching up. I mean, I was into online learning when I was at Chisholm. We had introduced online learning very, very much earlier, but what I realized is technology has moved to such a point where even a person like me, a sole person, can actually learn and use free websites, and I believe by emulating what you can do yourself, you can actually show that it's possible for others to do. So in a sense, I think with this gray hair now, I feel that if people see this, they realize that anything is possible. And I really, even Adam, just listening to you, I have no idea about gamification and all, but when we got talking, I thought this is something I need to learn about, and certainly there's always that interest in thing, and that's why I actually still lecture, because I realize there are lots of people who are doing things where I'm totally out of it, but by talking to them, I learn, and so it's a two-way traffic, and I think it's really an enjoyable life, actually, if you put it like that.
Well, I mean, what you're saying, I'm learning about gamification, even if you haven't conceptualized it that way, you've been living it in a variety of ways, and it's a fascinating thing. The other point that I wanted to draw about from our first meeting, and being completely transparent and showing probably students what they need to do from what I wasn't doing. When we first met, we were all standing in a foyer, kind of an area where everyone was having coffee, chatting, and that kind of thing. It was a morning meeting, which I am not designed for biologically. And I completely admit, staring at my smartphone.
You were
probably on Twitter. I've got 6 profiles, so I could spend all day on there. I don't spend that much time on there, but I was there, not taking the initiative, not necessarily motivated to do what I should have been doing at that event. I was probably the only academic in the room. There was a lot of industry practitioners who would have felt that they fitted in much more than me. You came up to me, and what had us achieved? One, we're having this chat, and we'll meet up again, that kind of thing. But students are often given this message, and the people who stand out are the people who do take that initiative at a small level and at the larger levels of putting themselves in the position to take advantage of luck. Now, I did that by getting myself out of bed and going to that event, which I didn't have to go to. It was completely non-compulsory as part of my job. It was really a kind of an almost extracurricular activity. But you really showed the importance of networking. And the fact that we had a quick chat, and the kind of potentialities, the value that can come out of that. I've seen people contact me who I never met before online through LinkedIn or other sites, Twitter, and that is now so key, whether it's in person or online, to take the initiative, to be present and exist.
Look, that's spot on, Adam, because what you don't realize is, or I might have mentioned, is I'm a heavy introvert. I mean, if you look at the MBTI scale, I'm absolutely on the introverted end. And I think what I realized in life is, and public transport certainly made me public more than I wanted to. But what it did to me was say that even though you got a preferred persona, which you like, I was quite comfortable into it. I realized that there's a public face to you, and you've got to learn to be comfortable with that. For me, the most important thing was a train ride back home, after work, because that would be my downtime to get back into my space. But out there, it is so important to network. I mean, I wouldn't have met you if I were now 30 years younger, because I would have just remained in my corner. But I realized that, there's always this importance of meeting someone, and we just engaged immediately, didn't we? It was so quick.
Well, everyone thinks I'm an extrovert because of the silly things I do on YouTube and Twitter and this kind of things. The only comment I ever got from teachers consistently across every year at school, primary, secondary, and if they wrote reports at university, was Adam does not speak in class. They didn't want to give me a job teaching because they were worried how shy I was. I am very much an introvert as well. Anyone who sees my videos with that many board games behind me probably would assume that anyway. But we can present ourselves. A lot of people watching this video will feel, well, I'm shy. I don't know if I could go up to someone. It just takes a little bit of a push out of your comfort zone, doesn't it?
Absolutely.
And that is where things happen.
And you grow so much. I mean, I in this career, for instance, I realized that because I go out and meet different sorts of people. It's amazing how even from a lifestyle perspective, there are lots of people, and you're right, Adam, the millennials are looking for things that I thought, it would be really the people in their 40 pluses, Gen X and all. But slowly as I've been engaging with this model and thinking, there's a wonderful person I met when I was volunteering for Salvation Army, and she's actually done some amazing things by the age of 28. And I feel like, I'm waiting till 60 to do these things, but I know that now the millennials, and I look at my own kids, they're thinking differently. They all want to volunteer. They want to actually travel. They want to do good work, and suddenly this model doesn't become an isolated thing for people who have got nothing else to do with their lives. Actually, it is part of life, and I've actually turned it around from a work-life model, but to a life-work model. It means first live life, and work is part of it, and everything else with it. So, yeah, you're right. I mean, it's bounding now with people looking for new things, and hopefully, as we go along this, we'll learn more about the model that could be expanded to other, regions.
Exactly. Yeah, and I mean, along with those people looking for things, there is a huge crisis of engagement across every aspect of society, educational context, industry, and everywhere. And so I guess the main point maybe to finish this video on is, don't wait for things to happen. Like I was waiting on my mobile phone. Wasn't even waiting for things to happen. I was just waiting for the event to start.
Yes.
Make things happen, I suppose, is the key point.
Brilliant.
Put yourself out there. Be active, whether it's on a micro level of what you're doing in the unit. Make yourself stand out, but on a macro level. And I've seen students already gamifying their everyday lives through these apps that I'm using for the unit. They're starting to motivate themselves on different levels. And that motivation and reward, thinking about what we want, what makes us happy, that's part of really what we need to motivate ourselves in all aspects of life.
Yeah, life is good in that sense, if you make it happen.
Fantastic. Thank you very much for talking to us.
Thank you, Adam.
Thanks for watching.